name's Kevin, and if you've got any questions as we go through, feel free to yell out. I was just going to run through a few basics with screening. A lot of people these days have got various areas in the garden which they need to screen, particularly with the house blocks getting smaller, the houses getting bigger, the houses getting closer, and the loss of privacy from neighbours overlooking yards and what have you. So a lot of people want sort of instant screening to try and block out those sort of situations. Depending on the height that you might need for a screening plant, there's various choices. If I start with something like that, a lot of people these days have apartment type gardens, balcony gardens, where they still like a little bit of green, and they need to screen off, say, an air conditioning unit or the neighbour's balcony next door. So they don't need anything particularly too big, but something that's not going to take up a lot of space. And this is what's known as an espaliered plant. Espaliering means the plant is trained from its normal habit into a flat climber-like growth habit. So this is a camellia, and we all know how a camellia can grow normally. They're larger camellias at the back there, probably up to about 2.5 metres high by, say, a metre or so wide. So this one's been trained flat on a trellis. It would need probably pruning, say, once a year to maintain that sort of habit. But it might be good for screening something low down, for instance, if you didn't need a lot of height in a balcony type of situation. And that's green all the time, of course. Give you some flowers at certain times of the year, and provided it gets a reasonable amount of water, and be happy in a pot through that period of time. So that's a good alternative for areas where you're limited for space and you still need not be able to see through to what it is you need to block on. For extra height, there's probably 3 or 4 that tend to be more popular than others for screening. Our most popular one by far would be Portuguese Laurel. It's sort of ticks all the boxes. It's a hardy plant. It's evergreen. It grows quickly. It takes a lot of hard pruning if need be. So if you have a fairly narrow area, say along a back fence or a side fence that you need to screen the neighbours, these will take it. I've got them planted along my back fence. I've only got a 600mm wide garden bed. I planted up the middle of the garden bed. I've got the lawn that abuts the garden bed, so I don't want them to come out any further than the width of the garden bed itself. And I just shear it, I just cut it hard, and I tend to do it twice a year. And the more you prune them, the thicker they are, the denser they are, and the more screening you get from them. So mine now been in probably 18 months, and they went in about this size, and they're up to the height of the paling fence within that period. So it's a quick growing plant. It could grow bigger than that. I want to keep mine at the height of the fence. These could probably grow up to, say, 4 or 5 metres high if need be. It does get a flower on it. It's not traditionally grown for its flower. It's more as its screening ability, and has that really nice dark green glossy leaf, so which it keeps throughout the year. Very dense plant. We've got them in the car park gardens here. They've been out there for many, many years. They had a light prune this week, and they won't be pruning again now until probably September, October. But a very versatile plant. You can actually have them where you can, what they call pleach the lower branches. So you have a clear trunk up to a certain height, which allows you to plant other things of interest underneath it, and then the foliage above that height, which will give you screening as well. It has that nice red sort of stem to it, which is another characteristic of the plant. But easy plant to grow, providing it gets a reasonable amount of water in the dry weather. It grows very, very quickly, particularly in the springtime. So these in the spring could probably put on at least, 1/2 to 3/4 of a metre of growth every year. So you can imagine that all over the plant, how quickly you'd get coverage. There's similar looking plants. This is a Viburnum, which has got a shinier leaf than the Portuguese Laurel. The Viburnum gets a rounded sort of cluster of white flowers at the top of the plant every year, which is another feature. It has a nice growth habit. It's a very bushy sort of plant and hedges really well, and again it's quick growing. Sometimes used a bit in areas that are a bit more protected, say a really hot sun. They tend to grow better where they're in a bit more protection. The Portuguese laurel will grow either in full sun through to semi-shaded areas. So these are quite good, say, down the side of the house where it doesn't get a lot of sun, but you still need some screen. There's various types of the evergreen Viburnum. There's a lot of deciduous Viburnums, but this is a variety of evergreen Viburnum. They all have similar leaves, some are smaller, some are larger leaves. Quite a nice flower if you wanted a screening plant, it's going to provide flowers as well. There's a range of Australian native plants in the Lilly Pilly family. This is a reasonably new one, it's been around for about 3 or 4 years now. It's called Backyard Bliss, very quick growing, and being a native it's very tolerant of a whole range of conditions, so tolerate really poor soils if need be and still grow quickly in those sort of conditions. They're not all that great in shade. It'll take a little bit but not a lot of shade. They tend to thin out if they don't get enough sun. It makes a very good dense plant, and the new growth when it comes out in the springtime is like a bronzy colour on the top of the plant, so quite attractive when it gets all that flush of new growth on it. Again, it's got the dark green glossy leaves. Everybody seems to favour anything that's got a dark green glossy leaf in any type of plant. It must be, the way we're conditioned, I guess. Everybody loves that really dark green glossy leaf. What I'd encourage with any hedging or screening plants, if you want density, the more you prune them, the better they are. A lot of people are tempted to put a screening plant in and not prune it until it gets up to the height they want. It's better to prune it as the plant grows, because every time you do that, it promotes more branches on the tree itself. So, and you still gain the height, even though the plant's been cut, but it's going to be a lot thicker, a lot bushier low down if you continue to cut it as it grows. So don't just plant it and leave it, you want to just keep chopping the top off it. It doesn't matter what sort of plant you use. That's one type of Lilly Pilly. You get all different varieties. This one's called Purple Rain, which has that more of a purpley bronzy colour. They're breeding new varieties of these all the time. A lot of them originate from the same parent plant, but they're trying to develop new colours in the foliage just to make it a bit more interesting. But all of them are tough plants, being native plants, they're pretty forgiving. They'll grow in a whole range of conditions. But that's quite a nice foliage plant and another good sort of dense bushy plant. Probably you all know the old Pittosporums, and again they sort of come in a whole range of different forms, different coloured leaves. Probably one of the quickest growing out of all the screening plants, and you either love them or you hate them now. They've been around probably since the 70s and planted extensively. Originally there was the old James Sterling, Silver Sheen, Screen Master. This one's called Golden Sheen because it's got the yellow through the leaf. Very reliable plants. Most of them originated from New Zealand, and again they've been bred over time, to get all these new varieties and new colours in them. Very quick growing. Unpruned, they can grow quite large, probably maybe 5 or 6 metres high, and they can look a bit rangy if they're not pruned. But if you see one that's been well maintained and well pruned, they can make a very, very tough, nice foliage hedge. Another popular screening plant, I won't move it because it's too big, that's a weeping Lilly Pilly, and this is a Queensland native plant, it's a native rainforest tree. But it adapts to a whole range of climates in Australia, and very easy plant to grow again with the glossy leaves. The new growth, it hasn't got a lot at the moment, but the new growth can be a pinky sort of colour. And it's called Weeping Lilly Pilly because it has that weeping sort of growth habit. So it's quite a nice, delicate type tree. Prunes very, very well as a hedge. If you need a lot of height, say if it was a 2-storey building that you were trying to screen next door, this one's often used because it will give you that extra height if need be, and it will get there fairly quickly. Normally plant them, say with most of these sort of hedging plants, we normally recommend about 1 metre apart if you want density. Because the further apart you plant them, the longer it's going to take for the plant to grow in and give you the screen. That one gets quite bulky, so you probably only need to plant those maybe every 2 metres apart. A lot of people use various types of magnolias these days for screening. We've got a very old hedge of little gem planted along our driveway here, went in about 20 odd years ago when these were first released. And ours are quite big now, they're probably a good 4 to 5 metres high. Originally we used to prune them, now we just let them go, and they're still pretty good, still pretty bushy. A lot of people love the glossy type leaves, the magnolias. That's the main attraction. It's a very nice ornamental tree even on its own, but can look very effective if it's planted in numbers along a fence line. Some people don't like the dark underside to the leaf, which a lot of the magnolias tend to have. They are sort of making new varieties all the time. There's a new one that's been released that's called Sweet and Neat, and that's a bit more upright, a bit narrow, so it's good for a smaller space in the garden. Still has the dark underside of the leaves, it has a narrower leaf, has a larger white flower. They all have that distinctive saucer-shaped white scented flower, and the Sweet and Neat has quite a larger flower, and they're all got a perfume to them as well, which is a bonus. And they flower, once they get going, they tend to flower on and off throughout the year, particularly through the warmer months of the year. The white against the dark foliage looks, quite good. This is Little Gem. You've probably heard of Teddy Bear. Teddy Bear has more of a cone-shaped growth habit. Any of them can be used in a row as a screening type plant, or even on their own as an individual screening plant. Most of these evergreen magnolias originate from southern America, southern USA, so they're used to that really warm climate, and they only tend to grow in Melbourne once we get the heat starting, say around about October. You can almost time it to the day when they start to grow. They love that really hot weather, and they grow right through the summer, and then they just shut down for the winter. We've only got a small one of these in stock at the moment. If you want a very quick growing screening plant for sun and shade, again it's got the dark green glossy leaf, the white flower. This is an Escallonia. It makes a very quick screen, and a very bushy sort of plant. Has the white cluster flowers on them, and the flowers last for quite a long time. Very drought tolerant plant. So if you had an area, say down the side of the house, which wasn't likely to get watered much, and you wanted something to grow quickly to screen the fence or screen the neighbour, something like that would be really good. There's various types of Escallonia, but this one's quite good as a taller growing plant. This is Escallonia ivyi. It gets a bad reputation, this plant. In Queensland, where it's native, it grows very big. It's a very large tree in Queensland. And as a result up there, the roots get huge. When the tree gets older, it has a very extensive root system. If you drive down, say, I think it's High Street in Melbourne, they've got these standardised as pom-pom trees. It's often used as a standardised plant because it grows quickly, and it has quite an effect as a standard plant. In Melbourne, the root system doesn't tend to be an issue, providing the plants put in the right spot and the water is maintained to it. They don't grow as big down here, obviously, because our climate doesn't allow it to. It's a lighter green foliage, which some people prefer over the dark green foliage. And we've got this plant as a hedge in the car park, and it's a very dense sort of bushy hedge out there. The downside of any of the ficus, they are affected by frost. If you get a fairly heavy frost in winter, it can burn the top off the plant. But being ficus, they grow out of it very, very quickly and very easily. Very quick growing screen, can be pleached, can be standardised, would grow in pot, grows in semi-shaded areas, grows in full sun, very tough plant, very easy to grow. The one at the back, obviously the camellias. Camellias often get overlooked as a screening plant. If you don't need a lot of height and you want a lot of flower, then particularly the Sasanqua camellias, they look fantastic as a full-formed hedge. Foliage to the ground, nice dark green glossy leaves, a range of flower colours. Average up to about 2.5 metres high, and for a camellia they're not too bad, they grow reasonably quickly. Providing the soil's good, they are sun tolerant. They prefer probably to grow in a more semi-shaded area, but if they're watered well and they're in a good soil, they'll grow happily in full sun. They are a sun tolerant variety. That's a more compact, another new variety of camellia. It's got the smaller flower. This is called Slim and Trim. So again, one maybe for a pot or for a balcony garden that you need some low screening. It has that upright sort of growth habit, has the smaller leaves, but still gets very dense and gets a load of flowers on it. Now this is only a young plant, and you can see there's quite a lot of flower buds on there for such a young plant. So you can imagine when they get older how many flowers you get off the plant itself. Does really well in a pot, that variety. I've seen them used in a long trough on a balcony, a hot exposed balcony, and there might be, say, 4 planted in the trough, and then they're all just trimmed up to about that height. They look terrific, and will tolerate that really hot exposed condition, providing it gets a reasonable amount of water while it's established. They're probably the main ones I was going to talk about. Did anybody have any particular questions they might want to ask?